Armis comes for all of us.
Gentlemen, let's broaden our minds.
Are they in the proper approach pattern for today?
Negative.
Hold the weapon! Now! Charge the lightning field.
So let's go back to a time when things were sane.
All right.
And even then, barely. I had talked about doing a UFO incident before that I think we should talk about at some point. I didn't realize that it happened around Christmas.
And what is that, Skip?
Well, the British Astronomical Association Meteor Section newsletter, number 4.
I'm well aware. I get it all the time.
Yeah, this comes to our door daily. My dog brings it to me.
It's the only thing it's trained to do.
It's a Daggett.
One of those chimps and cyborg bodies, eh?
Exactly, which is really cruel if you think about it. In the issue number 4, which was from February 1981, contained a brief report of a fireball seen on Boxing Day, 1980. And for those of you who don't know Boxing Day, which by that I mean America, it's December 26th.
Also known as the day after.
Starring Steve Guttenberg.
The Goot has returned.
By 4 witnesses, seemingly in Suffolk, England, who had all estimated its brightness comparable to a 3/4 moon and lasting 3 to 4 seconds. The 4 witnesses in question were Fred Skip Burren.
Ooh.
There's one everywhere. John Burroughs, Ed Cabansag, J.D. Chandler, and Jim Penniston. Now, Sergeant Penniston, Burroughs, and Cabansag were a 3-man United States Air Force security police team stationed at RAF Woodbridge, called to investigate the possibility of a landed craft of unknown origin in the surrounding Rendlesham Forest.
Oh, there we go.
Drop the mic, bitch!
So was it Santa?
I guess we can wrap it up. So please subscribe.
Give us 5 Daggets on podcast app of your choice.
They're monsters. They're horrible monsters. So Rendlesham Forest is located between 2 U.S. Air Force bases in the UK, Woodbridge and Benwaters, which are near England's east coast. The bases were long considered strategically vital to NATO and therefore paid close attention to by both UK and US militaries. Only Penniston and Burroughs went into the woods to investigate the supposed landed craft. Cabansag stayed near the truck as a relay for the radio, and by the accounts of everyone involved, it was a harrowing experience that changed the course of their lives. Cabansag watched the mysterious multicolored lights in the forest pulsating, while his 2 team members headed out on foot. As Penniston and Burroughs approached the unusual lights, they noticed abnormal sensations. It seemed as though the air was electrically charged. According to the men, time seemed to slow down, and physical movement became labored. Eerily, everything was silent. When they reached the site, the craft itself was sitting in a slight clearing. Penniston cautiously approached the craft, which he described as a triangular black and... Jesus Christ. I spent all day writing this.
He described it as Jesus Christ.
Only the Penniston men come past. I'm going to bookmark that. He described as triangular, black, and glassy. It had patterns of blue, yellow, and red colors running through the surface as though part of the craft, like a lava lamp. The sight was baffling considering Sergeant Penniston was versed in all types of aircraft. He was a United States Air Force trained crash investigator. As part of his advanced training, he studied both the NATO and Warsaw Pact inventories of aircraft. So he was extremely familiar with this stuff. At least he should have been. His close-up investigation of the craft included photographs he took, measurements, drawings, which he wrote in his USAF-issued notebook. He took special note of strange pictorial-type markings on the side of the craft. Now, this notebook will become an increasingly important element of the story and of the UFO community as a whole as the mystery unfolds over the next 40 years. More on that later. Quote, this comes from Penniston. As we got to the tree line, it became apparent that it wasn't an aircraft crash. It was mainly a white light inside the woods, maybe 15 feet was inside there, maybe 20 feet. Penniston described a craft measuring approximately 9 feet by 7 feet. So 9 feet long by 7 feet high, from which the light emanated. Upon closer inspection, there were globular colored lights running through the object, and it was covered in places with pictorial glyphs, which had a rough etched texture. Penniston, like an idiot, instinctively reached out to touch the etched symbols. I mean, come on. Don't touch it. Don't fucking touch it.
It's like the scientist in Prometheus.
Yes. Why would you do any of the things you're doing? Stop it. Just stop it.
Joe, man, that movie.
Are you an expert on things that have never, ever happened? He described them as feeling like sandpaper compared to the rest of the smooth surface. Upon touching it, he claimed the entire object became illuminating, which blinded him. When his eyesight finally returned, he was standing next to the craft facing the pictorial glyphs. Then the craft started to turn a vivid, bright white, even more intensely. So bright, in fact, that Penniston thought it was going to explode. So he took cover nearby as the craft became completely enveloped in brilliant light. The craft then lifted approximately 4 feet from the ground and maneuvered between the trees. The soldiers chased it into a field where it abruptly shot upward, shining light down on them. At that moment, they all lost consciousness. When they came to, they were back in the forest. Other troops sent to rescue them found tripod landing marks where the object had rested. The following day, back in his bunk, Jim reported seeing flashing images of ones and zeros as a result of touching the glyphs, so he dictated them all in his notebook. So that's kind of crazy.
Yeah?
This incident is considered widely to be the UK's Roswell incident. And a lot of that comes from its similarity in that it happened near an Air Force base. It had some corroboration officially from both the US and UK military at the time, and that it was considered to be covered up after the fact, but that these things were taken very seriously by, obviously, both the UK and US governments, mostly because they were really important NATO bases. So what did the other soldiers say that went in with him into the forest? Quote, "It was about 3 o'clock in the morning when I was riding around with my supervisor and we saw some strange lights. He originally saw something coming out of the sky into the forest. That got my attention and it was in the forest. We drove off base to get a better idea before we called anything in. And when we got to the end of the road, it was where you were forced to go left or right. I got out of the vehicle and everything seemed strange. There was a static electricity in the air. Things didn't seem right. We returned to the gate, and when we had to report it, we called it in. They sent a security supervisor down because we were law enforcement. Security was sent down to evaluate. They took a look, and they saw the same stuff, saw strange lights. There were some blue, green, and yellow lights, and a white light. They contacted some radar sites, which confirmed that there was something seen on the radar that disappeared into the forest. Burroughs would approach the strange lights on 2 separate nights. Quote, I remember the only thing I can tell you is that on the first night and the third night out, both people I was with claimed that I was gone. It was the first night that the object was over me. They could see the light on me, affecting me the third night. Another soldier here, Adrian Bastinza, said that I had disappeared, but I don't recall either time, nor do I remember touching it. I remember getting close to it both times. So in the aftermath of this encounter, Burroughs explained that his health started taking a horrible turn. Quote, regarding my injuries, I didn't feel well afterward. I was looked at and they didn't understand other than it could be a virus or something. I had some throat issues. They treated it like they usually would and sent me on my way. I went back to the States, and that's when I got sick one day and I couldn't get back to the base when I needed to be. At the emergency room, they found a heart murmur. he couldn't have entered the service with a heart issue. Quote, this doctor says, I have a massive heart murmur. I found out later I couldn't have even gotten into the military with this heart murmur. So all of a sudden, I had a heart murmur. When I returned to the base, they immediately brought in a doctor from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and he came in and evaluated me and had me immediately go to Wright-Patterson the next day. They ran all sorts of tests on me, and then he said, well, you have an issue with your heart. We're going to monitor it, but it's nothing that needs to be addressed immediately, and then I went on my way. But then, Burroughs later said that his heart condition should have been fatal, but it wasn't due to an, quote, anomalous tissue growth in his heart, which is odd. Quote, I had a heart problem that should have killed me, but it didn't because I had this anomalous growth tissue. He also then later said that he had increasing visual problems, worsened over the years because of this incident, leading to him asking a specialist if he had been exposed to radiation. So the first piece of evidence to come about from this incident into the public was essentially years later, because nobody really took it seriously at the beginning. And this was made to the public in a memorandum written by Deputy Base Commander Lieutenant Colonel Charles I. Halt to the Ministry of Defense, with a C. That's the British. This is known as the Halt Memo. This was first publicly available in the United States under the Freedom of Information Act in 1983. So this memorandum is dated January 13th, 1981. It's referred to as unexplained lights. Now, the 2-week delay between the incident and this report might account for some of the errors in dates and times that they say, but that's something to be debated. So I'm going to just quote from the actual memo. Early in the morning of 27 December 80, 2 USAF security police patrolmen saw unusual lights outside the back gate at RAF Woodbridge. Thinking an aircraft might have crashed or have been forced down, they called for permission to go outside the gate to investigate. The on-duty flight chief responded and allowed 3 patrolmen to proceed on foot. The individuals reported seeing a strange glowing object in the forest. The object was described as being metallic in appearance and triangular in shape, approximately 2 to 3 meters across the base and approximately 2 meters high. It illuminated the entire forest with a white light. The object itself had a pulsing red light on top and a bank of blue lights underneath. The object was hovering or on legs. As the patrolman approached the object, it maneuvered through the trees and disappeared. At this time, the animals on a nearby farm went into a frenzy. The object was briefly sighted approximately an hour later near the back gate. The next day, 3 depressions, 1.5 inches deep and 7 inches in diameter, were found near the object, near where the object had been sighted on the ground. The following night, the area was checked in for radiation. Beta and gamma readings of 0.1 milliroentgens were recorded with peak readings in the 3 depressions and near the center of the triangle formed by the depressions. A nearby tree had moderate readings on the side of the tree. Later in the night, a red sun-like light was seen through the trees. It moved about and pulsed. At one point, it appeared to throw off glowing particles and then broke into 5 separate white objects and then disappeared. Immediately thereafter, 3 star-like objects were noticed in the sky, 2 objects to the north and 1 to the south, all of which were about 10 degrees off the horizon. The objects moved rapidly in sharp angular movements and displayed red, green, and blue lights. The objects to the north appeared to be elliptical through an 8 to 12 power lens. They then turned into full circles.
And that's the thing from the next day, right?
Mm-hmm.
From the 27th?
Yes, the next night.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because they went back out. Well, different people. Halt did.
I'm just reading from his memo.
Right. I just like it doesn't delineate that. I think it's probably it helps. Like there's an incident on the 26th, and then Holt, who was like, I'm going to investigate this. He went out, looked for himself with other soldiers, and they saw these other incidents as well.
Right. I know. I had a very difficult time trying to figure out how to structure this.
Yeah. It's good to point out that there were like 2 actually entirely separate incidents over 2 days. That's all this one big event.
Right. Or 3 days, depending on who's correct in how they date things.
Right.
And that becomes a real problem later, as it turns out. The objects to the north remained in the sky for an hour or more, and then the object to the south was visible for 2 or 3 hours and beamed down a stream of light from time to time. Numerous individuals, including the undersigned, witnessed the activities in paragraphs 2 and 3. Signed, Charles I. Holt, Lieutenant Colonel, USAF, Deputy Base Commander. So, just a brief recap. 4 witnesses at one base saw a fireball in the sky, thought it landed in Rendlesham Forest. 3 of them were dispatched to go investigate, one of which, Penniston, was an expert at aircraft and aircraft crashes. They report a very eventful encounter, come back, report to their higher up, who then, like you say, sends other officers out to investigate the situation.
Along with himself the next day.
Along with himself. And then experiences all sorts of other crazy shit.
Has a tape recorder with him during that event and records the whole thing. Him experiencing it.
Holt will become maybe the most important character in this as years go by, because you will have the Holt memo, obviously this, which we just read, but then the later Holt tape, and then the Holt affidavit, which he does in 2009, I want to say. And then he does a series of different things over time that talk about this. And though he was a witness to the second night of incidents, and possibly third, he isn't the biggest driver of the story. That ends up becoming Penniston, because he's the only one who claims to have actually made physical contact with the craft.
The movie The Craft. Yeah.
Would not have anything to do with that reboot.
Same here.
Well, and that's the end of part 1. I just wanted to end it there.
Oh, nice. All right. Please do check out next episode to see where this Rendlesham Forest story goes. But until the meantime...
because no one knows.
Until the meantime, check out previous episodes. There's a lot of cool stuff. More UFOs, comic books, all types of geeky stuff. Please like, share, subscribe. If you know anybody who might be interested in what we're talking about, hey, share it with them. You know, give it a grandpa.
Give it a grandpa.
Give that a grandpa.
Just go back to me, grandpa.
For this podcast, if you wouldn't mind rating us, perhaps 5 New Jersey Drones on the podcast app of your choice, ideally Apple Podcast. That is the best way for us to be seen and then heard. It really spreads the word out for us and what we do. And hey, thanks. Thank you. We appreciate you for listening. We hope you stop back by and see what's going on with these crazy cats here on Dispatch Ajax. But until that time, Skip, what should they do?
Until we are replaced by drones from New Jersey, they should probably clean up after themselves to some sort of reasonable degree, make sure they've paid their tabs, tipped their KJs, their bartenders, and subsequent wait staff, and make sure they support their local comic shops and retailers. And from Jake and I, both, from Dispatch Ajax, we would like to say, Godspeed, fair wizards.
Please, go away.